afternoon. Thank you all again for being here today. My name is Amina Al-Jaber, and I am one of the students here in the Political Analytics program. I've worked in political polling for the past 6 years, and I joined the program because I really wanted to dive deeper into data and analytics and see how it is involved for major campaigns and to really grow my skill set. And so with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Becca Siegel back to Columbia as our keynote speaker for the inaugural Political Analytics Conference. Becca started her career as a community organizer and worked in campaign organizing for several election cycles before moving to analytics. She received her bachelor's degree from Stanford University and her master's degree in quantitative methods in the social sciences from Columbia University. She focuses on electoral strategy, data and analytics, voter targeting and voter contact, messaging, and polling. She has worked at the intersection of politics and data for over a decade and has held roles in each of the past 5 presidential campaigns. In 2019 and 2020, Becca was the Chief Analytics Officer on the Biden campaign. Through the primary and general elections, she developed the campaign's electoral strategy, guided the allocation of $1.6 billion in campaign spending, managed a team of 160-plus data scientists, analysts, and engineers, and learned way too much about delegate math. In the first year of the Biden administration, Becca served as senior advisor to the White House COVID-19 response team, using data to help direct federal pandemic resources and guiding the strategy for the public education campaign to increase vaccine confidence. We are thrilled that Becca has been able to return to Morningside Heights to deliver our keynote address. Becca will deliver her remarks and then take some questions. If you have a question, please write it on one of the index cards provided, and one of our lovely event staff will come and grab it from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is going to be too high. Okay. All right. Thank you, Amina, and thank you to everyone for putting this on. And thank you to everyone for being here. I was thinking about in this room, when I started doing this work, I didn't know what this work was because there was not a ton of professionalization of it, and I was just learning on the job. So the fact that there is a way for people to learn this in an institution is amazing. And I think the evolution of this field is in this room, so I'm very excited. I'm very excited that there are students in this room who are getting to learn some of these things early on in their careers. So just a few housekeeping things. So I do currently work on the Biden campaign. I am here in my personal capacity. So I do not represent the Biden campaign, and I will not be talking very much about this Biden campaign. I will talk a lot about the last one. Oh, thank you. See, I knew, however low it is, it's not low enough, All right, good, okay. So I will not be talking very much about this campaign, and if you want to leave now, if you were hoping for that, that's not what you're gonna get here. So what I will be talking a lot about is a favorite topic of mine, which is uncertainty. But before I can talk about uncertainty, I have to talk about what people usually want me to talk about, and a favorite topic of many others, which is polling. And I know there's a whole, that was apropos. There's a whole session about polling coming up after this, so I don't want to jump on anything there. But certainly when people think about data on political campaigns, they think about polling. And if you go onto the internet and you are interested in data and political campaigns, mostly you will see things about polling and are the polls skewed? Should we unskew them? Should we re-skew them? That's all you'll see. And I think that is a reasonable conversation to have. We should think about polling. We should think about how to do polling better. That is not that central to our strategy on campaigns. And I think after 2020, a lot of people were like, wow, the Biden campaign must have really figured out something with polling to make the decisions they made. And I don't think that's true. I would love to give ourselves credit for fixing polling. I don't think that is what we did. I don't think that's why we made good decisions, such as we did make good decisions, I think. It was because we knew polls are sometimes wrong. That is why we made good strategic decisions. And we were pretty sure that we could not predict everything perfectly, and we built strategies that were resilient to that sort of level of uncertainty. So that's what I want to talk about, is like, how do we incorporate not knowing stuff into our general campaign strategy? To talk about that, I think I'm just gonna like set the scene on like, how do you become president in the United States? Now, I know that probably feels for many of you like, yeah, I already know this, but shockingly, a lot of people like don't really track that you don't become president here, unfortunately, by winning the most votes. You become president by piecing together 270 electoral votes, which means you are winning some set of states, some of which are like pretty easy to win, and some of which are true toss-up states. You piece together these states to get to 270 electoral votes. The other thing to say about that is our goal is 270 electoral votes. It is not 300. It is not 400. You don't become more the president by getting more electoral votes, right? Our job is to not maximize the number of electoral votes we get, but to maximize our chances of getting 270 electoral votes. Or another way to say that is, in a scenario where the election is close, what states do we need to get to 270 electoral votes? So, which is, I go back to polling, whether we're up by 4 or down by 3, like, I'm not actually that interested in that. I'm interested in, if we are up by 0, what does the map look like? Now that's a little, you have to win the, whatever. If we're up, if the election is tied, what are the states that we need to win in order to get to 270 electoral votes? Because I'm not interested in 300 or 400, I'm not. So that sort of lays the scene for how we think about presidential campaign analytics. And where I'm going from here is to the uncertainty piece. So if you, sort of the job of analytics on these big campaigns and on small campaigns is, how do we spend our money? And we've like $20 billion, lots of money. Lots of money is to be spent. Oftentimes, I think people will ask us like two reasonable questions about how to spend our money. They'll say, which states do we need to win to get to 270 electoral votes? And which voters do we need to win those states? Those seem like really reasonable questions. I don't think we can answer those questions with certainty. So I'm going to talk about what we do instead. Instead of saying, which states do we have to win, we say, which states most increase our chances of reaching 270 electoral votes? So every battleground state has a probability of helping us reach 270 electoral votes, but no battleground state has a 100% chance of helping us reach 270 electoral votes. Now, there are some states you have to win, like if we're not winning on the Democratic side, if we're not winning New York, we are probably not going to become the president. But I can't say with certainty that you have to win Pennsylvania or you have to win Georgia. There's some probability that you have to win those states, but I cannot, and we don't, say with certainty that we have to win those states. So that's one place where if we had full certainty, we could say, win these states, don't win these states, and I'll talk more about what that actually looked like for us. We don't have that certainty. We are interested instead in the probability that we need to win a state. And the same deal with voters. So people ask us, which voters do we need to win? I don't think we can answer that. I think we can say which voters have the most probability of being the voter that helps us win the state, right? We can't say that we have 100% need to win any given voter, but there are some voters, some persuadable voters, who are more likely to be the one that gets us over the edge and some who are less. And so when we change around these questions, so instead of saying which states do we need to win, we say which states increase our chances of reaching 270 electoral votes. And instead of saying which voters do we need to win, we say which voters increase our chances of winning a state. When we ask the questions that way, we actually get like real numbers, right? Like these are quantifiable things. So when I talk about uncertainty, I don't mean that we just sort of like say we might be wrong. Sorry, can't answer that question, we don't know. Instead, we're saying we can simulate the election to build a strategy that allows for uncertainty. And when we put those two numbers together, how much does winning a state increase our chances of winning the election? How much does winning the voter increase our chances of winning the state? When we put those two things together, suddenly for every voter, we have a real value that tells us how important is it for our campaign to reach out to this voter. And then we can build a strategy around that, right? We can build a strategy around that that takes into account a lot of uncertainty, but is still a real strategy with real numbers that gives us real direction about how to spend our money. So, I want to talk a little bit about then, like that was a super hypothetical explanation of how we might do this. I want to talk a little bit about what this looked like in 2020. So I have one slide. I don't know if we can have it. Okay, yes, okay, great. Everyone loves little ridges for those in the know. Okay, so what this is a distribution. This is 2020 for the record. This is nothing new here. Distribution of potential results in 2020 going right into election day for us. So there's a bunch of things you can see here. One is some states are obviously easier for Democrats to win than others, right? Colorado, easier to win than Iowa. That we can all agree on. But what I think is important here is that some states are easier to predict than others. So, for example, Arizona and Georgia, a narrow distribution of potential results. We have more certainty about the outcome. Now, the outcome is a toss-up, but we have more certainty about it. Wisconsin, very wide distribution of potential results. So we have less certainty about the outcome. Now, I'll do a little side quest here about why this is, because I think it's interesting. So some states have really, we build these strategies based on voter file data, and voter file data differs by state. Some states have really great voter files for a number of reasons, some good and some bad, to be honest. But some states have really clean, great voter files that collect lots of data, and some states do not. Wisconsin, among the battleground states, has among the worst voter files that there is from a data standpoint. There's like tons of extra duplicated records on it. There's no age data for a lot of voters. Like, it's very hard to predict results in Wisconsin. It's also hard to predict results in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan just because there's more movement of voters and more polling error, which we've seen before. So, okay, I'm gonna talk about what this means for us. So if I didn't have this distribution of results and I was just going on top lines, I would say to get to 270 electoral votes, I'm just gonna win all these states, like at the top of the chart, up until Wisconsin. That would get to 270 if we just went up to Wisconsin. And that would be based on top line, because again, the point is like, let's invest in the states that will get us there, not the states that get us to 400 or 300 or whatever. That would be a super shady strategy to just invest in those states based on this, because look at how wide of a potential distribution of results Wisconsin has. So if we said, look, Wisconsin looks easier to win than Georgia, so let's invest in Wisconsin, that would be crazy, right? There's so much that could happen in Wisconsin. So when people are like, wow, the Biden campaign must have seen something in Georgia that led them to invest there, that made it look like it was easier to win than these blue wall Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan states, that's actually not true. I mean, we did see movement in Georgia, and we had more certainty that that movement was real, because you see the data's better, we have a better voter file, we can have more certainty about movement. But also, we had a lot of uncertainty about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And so if something happened, if polling was wrong in those places, which it is very easy for polling to be wrong in those places, and certainly history has shown it is easy for polling to be wrong in those places, and if polling is wrong in one of those places, it's probably wrong in all of those places. So we needed states that were quite different from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, that we could predict differently, that we had more certainty about, and that's what led us to Georgia and Arizona. Not because it looked like it was easy, or like it was easy to win or easier to win, but because it was taking into account the uncertainty that we had in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So that's what that means. When I talk about like, how do we quantify these things, how do we use them, that's why we invested in Georgia, which in the end seemed super, super smart, but it wasn't because we like cracked the code on the polling. It's because we were worried about Wisconsin, basically, because of this uncertainty. So I'll just close, and then I want to take questions, but I'll close with just sort of like, they let me have this soapbox, so I'll just say a few things on it. I think the first thing is, I think as a field, we have spent many years like sort of getting into the room, sitting around the table. And some of the way that we've gotten to the table is to sort of be these like all-knowing oracles of information and like truly being like gurus of how this stuff all works. And I think that's hurt us, to be totally honest, that we have sort of been in this position. And look, like when I was coming up in this field, that's what I was told to do. Like, basically just you have to have confidence in whatever you're saying, total confidence. If you don't have an answer to the question, they won't invite you back, so you have to come up with something and say it with confidence and do your, So I think that is bad. I think that has led us to bad decisions. So I think we actually like sometimes just need to turn down the confidence lever a little bit and also just be really clear about what we know and what we don't know, what we can answer and what we can't answer, how certain we are about the things we're saying. None of those things, I think at this point in the development of this field, will get us kicked out of the room. And if they are getting us kicked out of the room, like that's the problem for other people in the room. So I will just say, I'll just close with, our seat at the table can no longer be predicated on having the answer to every single question. And so for all of those who are practitioners or becoming practitioners, I would take that with you. I would trust your work and trust your place enough at this table to know that, you can say when you don't know the answer, you can say when you don't have a certain answer. And then for those who work with practitioners who are in the room, I will say, please let us back in when that is the case. So I will close there, and then I think we have like 10 minutes for questions? Okay, amazing. Okay, great. Hopefully you guys aren't asking questions about this campaign, because as I said, I'm not going to talk about it. Okay. Okay, this is a great question. Wow. Okay, how important is it, and how do you incorporate community relationships and organizers when determining the certainty of data? That is a great question. It's something that I think we have in the past written off as sort of like anecdotal. And certainly there's a lot of like collection bias when it comes to incorporating data that our campaign is collecting, right? Like we send out organizers to go talk to people, and the people that they talk to are not necessarily representative of every voter. The fact that we were able to talk to them probably means that they are not the average voter, because it's hard to talk to the average voter. So I think for a long time we were kind of like, well, just because you've heard that people hate our economic policy, that's just a weird set of people. I don't think we should do that, because that's really good data, and it's really hard to contact people in any format. I think we have to take that data and then use it in a smart way, and some of that is mathematical, like some of it is how we are weighting those incoming pieces of data. Some of it is like there's a lot of art to this work that is not like something we can write code for. So I think that's an important piece. But I will say, like in 2020, when we included field data, so like the data collected by our staff, it made our models better. It made our models more accurate when we included that. I think we have to include it in the right way, but we like had lots of versions of every model, and our best performing models were those that included data that our campaign collected. So it's also why, I think we have access on a campaign to more data than like public venues usually have. Not always, but usually. Whether that is like actual electoral data that we have more access to by the fact of being a campaign, but also the scale of data we're collecting, and then like what we can get from organizing. So it makes us better, but obviously there's a risk and we have to be smart about it. But generally speaking, like I think we should not ever throw away data if we can help it. I think we should just figure out how to wisely use it. I'll figure it out. We'll see what happens. Okay. This is good. We're going live. Oh, wow. Wow. These questions really, it's almost like I planted them. Okay. In terms of where to focus funds, is it worth it for campaigns to invest in bettering the voter data in places like Wisconsin? Or is this unwise, as it would help both sides? That's a great question. I think, like, in terms of where we would invest, so there's a few things. Like, yes, I think states collecting better data and having better practices in collecting data is gonna just, like, be helpful. I don't know, I don't feel so strongly about, like, we shouldn't do it so other people can't have it. But I think the bigger question or like bigger thing that I'm gonna choose to talk about here is, like, we improve our strategy mostly by having better underlying data. We improve our strategy a tiny bit by new and novel methods. But mostly, it's the boring stuff that is how we go from a really, really wide distribution to a narrow distribution. So, like, we could, invest in, like, some novel methodological way to better predict movement among the Wisconsin electorate, or we could just build a really good imputation of age. And probably building a really good imputation of age will improve our models much, much more than some investment in, like, a neural net that does a better job predicting movement of white non-college voters, right? Like, doing the boring stuff is often the thing that has the most impact. And most of the people working in analytics, in politics, are doing that stuff. Like, that's the really important building block. I will always say, like, better data and better implementation is where we're gonna make up ground in political analytics. Not necessarily, like, the methods are great and we should work on them, but I don't think that's where we're getting the most bang for our buck right now. There's a lot we can do on better data and better implementation. Okay, let's see. Oh God, how do you sell the idea of using probability versus a point estimate? Whew, yeah, that's a good one. It's really hard. And I think other folks here have talked about how, like, probability is still not something that people totally understand. I think there's a few ways that I approach sort of like the communication of this. One is, like, we can talk about this as not a probability, but as just, like, we've given this value to voters that represents how much we think talking to them improves our chances. And that, like, you're not using the word probability, but you're still talking about probability. I think people sort of, like, tune into that. But I'll also say not everyone does. And my MO generally is, like, people are smarter than they claim to be. Like, people who say, like, I hate math, I'll never understand this. Like, maybe if you use the wrong words, but most people are pretty smart and, like, actually can understand this. So I always start by trying to explain it. But look, sometimes, that's not always gonna work, and you do have to give some of these numbers, but I think, like, starting from this place allows you to kind of, like, aggregate up to get the answer that people are looking for, even if they don't know that probability was baked in all along the way. Okay. Okay, this one's fun. You mentioned the beginning of your career. What advice would you give to those just starting? Love this, great question. I think honestly, my biggest piece of advice is go join a campaign. Just, like, go join a campaign. You don't even have to work in analytics on a campaign. Just go do something. And I'll say, for the students in the room, especially those who are graduating this year, there is not another time in the next 4 years where there are more jobs available than right now. Like, that's how the money works. So more money is flowing into politics in the next 6 months than there's ever been. And then there will be, at least for the next 4 years, which means there are more jobs. So with my campaign hat actually on for 1 second, we are obviously hiring. Okay, I'm taking it off. That's all I'm gonna say. We are hiring, and many, many others are too, political organizations, groups, whatever. But, I started my career as an organizer, and I, like, didn't come to this through stats, math, anything technical. I studied historical cartography in college, which is really cool if anyone wants to talk about that, but is not super, super relevant. People are like, maps, and I'm like, no, these were more like paintings that I was studying. But, I think that doing organizing is like a incredible training ground for any other job in or out of politics. Because, going back to the earlier question, like a big thing you do as an organizer is like persuade people to do things that you want them to do. And that's really a really helpful skill as you are trying to sell a probabilistic model of voter contact to a campaign manager. That's a really useful skill when you are trying to make anyone take on the strategy that you want. So I think just getting onto a campaign, there's obviously like a lot of subject matter expertise. Some of it is technical, but that part's the easy part. It's like the other stuff in politics. I think there is a lot you can learn by just being there. So that's my big piece of advice. Okay, do we have time? We have time, okay. Has donor data changed your models? Yeah, we definitely incorporate donor data into our models. I think this was talked about a little bit earlier, but like the landscape of donors has really changed. So now there are a lot more of them giving like small amounts. And obviously like if someone donates, that's a really good predictor of their support. It also means that we can use that as sort of like training data for doing other support modeling. So maybe you haven't donated, but you have a very similar profile to someone who has, which means we should ask you to donate, but also means you're probably supportive of us. So there's sort of two ways that we do this. One is like I didn't talk about all the other stuff we do on campaigns, but like some of what we're doing is voter targeting strategy. We're also doing donor targeting strategy. Like we are building models of donors to do outreach to. So anything we can model, we'll try to, including donors. So that's one piece. And then obviously, yes, we are taking that data and using it in our models of turnout and support, because that's a good indicator. Okay, let's see. People lie to mess up a party's voter file. Okay. I'm not sure I totally understand this one, but I'll answer part of it at least. We've learned that people misrepresent their views in polls. Could people lie to mess up a party's voter file or to create issues for the opposing party? I think on a large scale, basically no. I mean, we're talking about like really large number. Like we have 300 million voters. Like you'd have to do a lot of messing up. Now, obviously, we care a lot about like the data security, so there's some risks there. But I think at an individual level, no. But I do want to talk about like when people misrepresent their views in polls, really briefly. One thing that people always do is over-report their intent to vote. And so we collect a lot of data on like, we ask people if they're gonna vote, and then like a really high number of people say they're going to, and then that's not like really reality, right? So like 95% of people say they're gonna vote. That's not exactly true. But in the spirit of like, we shouldn't throw away data, I actually think this data can be really useful. And the way we use it is actually like to track over time enthusiasm. So no, it is not a good representation of the total amount of people who will vote, but if at the beginning of the cycle, 80% of people say they're gonna vote, and then by the end, 95% of people say they're going to vote, that's like a real shift. That's real. We should not throw that piece of data away, but obviously we don't like assume that 95% of people are gonna vote because they said they would in a poll. So, okay, I think I maybe got, let me see, did I get all of these? Focus. Okay, are there more? I think I did all of them. Wow, no more questions, easy. Okay, well thank you so much for having me, and I'll be around, thanks.